talk more about this meeting with Mr. Yusuf Mubarak, a political commentator in Manama, Bahrain, tonight. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you and your viewers.
Thank you. And here in the studio, from the Israeli side, if you will, Ambassador Danny Eilon. Good evening.
Good to be with you, Yaakov.
I'll start with you, Mr. Mubarak. Give us the Bahraini angle on this meeting in Glasgow.
Well, I would have to say, as an independent observer, I am delighted to see that this reconnection after the pandemic has hopefully gotten its worst part behind us, that it has helped demonstrate the Abraham Accords to be transcendent beyond all administrations. We initiated this nature of the peace process in this day of age when President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu were around. Now we are in the time of the Bennett administrations, and it's nice to see a handshake, a positive grin, and also a potential to cooperate in more than the environment and the economic aspects of which the COP26 is the culmination.
That's an interesting point about changing the administrations. Ambassador Eilon, we somehow got used to this, but this is still a big deal.
I think, Yaakov, you just hit it on the head. It has become almost a common thing, a regular thing, that had it not happened, it would have been irregular. When you have the leader of Israel and a leader of Bahrain in the same venue, not meeting. So I think it just manifests the new Middle East in the sense that today there is just shared and common interest between Israel and Bahrain and the Gulf countries on two main issues. One, of course, is Iran. Second is the extreme terrorism from the Al-Qaeda and the likes, and ISIS, which is coming up again. And there is also a long term, which is, of course, sustainable development and cooperation on high tech to make sure that the entire Middle East continues to have water, energy, and food to the benefit of all of us.
And fight global warming as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mr. Mubarak, Israeli Prime Minister also met the foreign minister at the UN GA in New York, if you remember. So it looks like very warm relationships.
Indeed, and what's happening in the region will keep bringing us closer together on the official level and also hopefully more and more on the popular level. It's quite ironic to see that a climate conference at a presidential status or at a presidential level would discuss Iran, and Iran is a fan of the scorched earth policy, which is anti-environmental, I have to say, as well as the resurgence of terrorism fueled by what has taken place in Afghanistan. So what a venue to discuss contradictory elements of concern when it comes to the environment as well as regional security and global security for that matter.
Right. Ambassador Eilon, talking about Iran, it seems that in every meeting Israeli leaders bring up Iran. What would be the discussion like in a meeting like this with the Crown Prince and Israeli Prime Minister?
I think very much to coordinate positions and maybe a coordinated action vis-a-vis the United States and the other powers, mainly the E3, Germany, France, and the UK, where you can add the pressure from Israel to the pressure from the Gulf, and this can have some kind of an added value. And also, I believe, with the United States pivoting to the east and retreating from the Middle East, I think it makes all those allies of the United States, which feel maybe a little bit like orphans, to come together. And in that sense, I think Israel can really feel a big void, because if the United States is not here, then Israel is a good fallback in terms of a safety net, a security safety net. And the message is, again, we have the wherewithal. If we needed to, if we are pushed to the wall, we can take an action which is not necessarily diplomatic. And that should be an incentive, especially the United States, to move ahead, put the pressure on the Iranians, bring them back to the negotiation table, and bring back what I think is the most realistic, back to the JCPOA. I don't think we can get anything better than that, but at this point, it's a better alternative than any other.
Better than nothing. Well, definitely Iran on the top of Israeli agenda. I want to ask you, Mr. Mubarak, would you say that Bahrain is as worried about Iran nuclear threat as Israel?
If not more, because historically we were targets of Iranian radicalism and the escapism policy away from their internal suffering or failures much earlier. In fact, the transitioning period between the rule of the Shah and the advent of the Ayatollahs, that period saw Bahrain being a pivotal point of negotiation or embezzlement for Gulf security, also fueled by proxy groups that are fans of Iran or sympathizers, who have now been reduced to a minimum, thankfully, because of awareness and the shock or the aftershock of discovering the actual agenda that Iran targeted these parts of the population to use them as instruments of policy fulfillment. So this awareness now, combined with the increased radicalism and the rhetoric that comes from Iran, has put us together with you in the same trench.
At this point, I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Yusuf Mubarak in Manama, Dani Eilon